All right, we're set. Hello, Mike Kako, and good morning. For those of you who are here and online, we hope you and your ohana are well. So mahalo for joining us today. We are here at Kapolei High School Teachers Lounge, Go Hurricanes. I'm Mike Gabbard, State Senator since 2006, representing District 21, which includes Kapolei, Makakilo, Kalailoa, Honekahale, and portions of Fernandez Village in Eva. This is my 8th year being the chair of the Agriculture Environment Committee. And most of you regulars know that this is for first timers. We usually start at 9 a.m., but we had some technical difficulties. We got here at 8:15 this morning and thought we had everything wired, but as you know how things go in the real world. And we do finish promptly at 10 o'clock. So I'd like to introduce my 2 full-time staffers. Meg Turner, my office manager, working for me since 2014, is managing the Zoom. So are you? Okay. Yeah, 10 years, OMG. She's a townie, but due to technical difficulties, she ventured out here to the Wild Wild West to see if she could get our Zoom meeting working better from here.
Oh, there's Karen. Is everything good, Karen?
Everything is good. Sorry, I'm a little late.
Good morning, Karen.
Sorry I couldn't be there in person.
That's okay. And then we have Nanook Dennis, my community liaison. She's been with us since September. So when you call my office, that's who you usually talk to. And so today, after our guest speaker, if we have time, there'll be Q&A, and I'll do a brief community and legislative update. Again, if we do run out of time and you don't get a chance to speak, please send me an email and we'll follow up. And Nanook will also be taking copious notes on your concerns. So our guest speaker is a true heroine to Hawaiʻi name. Chelsea Arnott. She's the coordinator for the Hawaiʻi Invasive Species Council with the Department of Land and Natural Resources, aka DLNR, the Division of Forestry and Wildlife. Why, you may ask, is she a heroine? Because she's been focused on helping keep paradise by stopping the invasion of unwanted species here in the islands. And so we're grateful for her time this morning. Given all the threats that we've been hearing about recently in the news about the growing invasive species menace. So Chelsea is very knowledgeable about what's happening and how you can help prevent the spread of these invasive critters, such as the Coconut Rhinoceros Beetles, little fire ants, and Coqui Frogs, to name a few. So please have your questions ready. Chelsea received her graduate degree from UH College of Natural Resource and Environmental Management and has worked on invasive species since 2007. She was a committee clerk at the state legislature for a while, and so her current role with DLNR combines all her experience and interests to help improve biosecurity for the state. Chelsea, the floor is yours.
These have the best introductions.
Let me just get the, do you want to go ahead and find your presentation?
Sure.
Just let you drive. Is that okay?
Okay, yeah, am I on camera too? And
Yeah.
so you are sharing?
Yeah,
Okay.
but I'm just not on the right
That's
side.
okay.
This one.
Yep. Yep.
So just go, yeah, close that. And go to
There. Oh, but that's what's showing, yeah.
no. Well, we have a projection for the audience, and this is for our Zoom audience.
Gotcha. Okay. Bear with me.
But if you could just let me know when to change the slide.
Sure.
Awesome.
Okay. Can everybody see that okay?
And then, yeah, you just put yourself.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Karen. So aloha, everybody. Thanks for that wonderful introduction, folks in person. And then we also have everybody on Zoom. My name's Chelsea Arnott, as Senator Gabbard said, and I'm the Invasive Species Coordinator with the Department of Land and Natural Resources. But my primary role is really supporting our Hawaiʻi Invasive Species Council. So I'm going to talk today about invasive species and biosecurity here in Hawaii. I'm going to focus on some of the pests that are impacting your district here. But first, I'm going to take you through the natural history of invasive species. So we're going to just go back a little ways, 70 million years. This is when the Hawaiian archipelago first formed. And we were very isolated. We had a few colonizers that would arrive. We define native species by not using human modes of transportation. So they evolved through coming here with wings, waves, or wind. These are our native species. And it was the occurrence of very infrequent colonization events that took course over millions of years. And some of those native species include our native Hawaiian monk seals, the Hawaiian forest birds, our native land snails. So there's just an array of native species that are unique to Hawaii because they were able to evolve here in isolation. And because of that, they lack a lot of defenses that you would typically find of other species on the continent. And so back when our first native species arrived, that resulted in around 20,000 native species. And what I'm going to take you through is just this timeline of how new pests or new species have exponentially increased here in Hawaii. Now, our first human arrival about 1,000 years ago with the Polynesian voyagers, and they brought the first non-native species. So on their boats, they brought some plants and they brought some animals like kalo, geckos, ulu. So kind of these Polynesian fruits and vegetables that we know here today and that we really rely on. And they also brought the first invasive species. So invasive species are those that cause some kind of threat to our environment, our economy, and just our way of life. And those were the first rodents, rats, and then pigs. And that increased the amount of species here in Hawaii by 34. But a lot of the species they brought aren't necessarily invasive because they involved in a similar island ecosystem. So they don't have that, those occurrences and those characteristics that cause damage or harm to our environment, agriculture, economy, and just our way of life. Now, 245 years ago, we have Western contact. We have the first Europeans arrive, and they bring a whole heap of species. So they bring the first goats and sheep for the economy and for food. And those are intentional introductions. So they're bringing those species to Hawaii on purpose, but we also have unintentional introductions. This is where we get mosquitoes from, these unintentional carry stowaways. So with that, we have over 500 new non-native species introduced. And then fast forward to today, where we have 1.4 million residents here in Hawaii, over 9 million, and I should be cueing you, sorry, but you're doing a good job, and over 9 million visitors per year. And of course, with all those residents and all that cargo and people coming into Hawaii, that's just new potential for new pest incursions to come into Hawaii. So what a lot of people don't know is that we have no native reptiles to Hawaii. So that's gone from 0 native to 40 reptiles. And that's like your anole, your geckos, those are all non-native introductions. We have over 10,000 introduced plants. There's 420 non-native aquatic species. And they did an assessment over at Kahului Airport back in 2002. And what they discovered by doing 100% inspections at that airport is that there's one new insect or plant disease that's introduced every day, which is really scary. So just the amount of introductions has just increased exponentially as we've grown our population and commerce and globalization. But there's things in place to help us address invasive species and these introductions. Back in 2002, the legislature put together a report that declared that invasive species are the biggest threat to our economy, environment, and our way of life. And from that report, they formed the Hawaiʻi Invasive Species Council in 2003. And what this is, it's statewide coordination. If you've had invasive species in your yard or you've had to deal with mosquitoes, you know that they don't abide by landowner boundaries, jurisdictions, they're going to go where they want. And so there was really this need for statewide coordination in order to address invasive species. So the council was formed and it's comprised of 6 of the state departments that have some jurisdiction in invasive species management and prevention, including the Department of Land and Natural Resources, which is where my position is, and then the Department of Agriculture. And this is your Hawaiʻi Invasive Species Council. So we have leadership from those 6 state departments: Department of Land and Natural Resources, Agriculture, Health, University of Hawaii, Business, Economic Development, and Transportation. And then we have representation from each of the counties, a senator and a representative, which Senator Gabbard has been part of our council for a number of years now. But along with the state departments, we have a lot of other organizations that are working on invasive species. Sorry, next slide. There you go. Invasive species and helping to combat them on each of the islands. So we have the Island Invasive Species Committees. Here on Oahu is the Oahu Invasive Species Committee. Let me click on that.
Well, they're not seeing it in Zoom.
Oh,
Resume share,
there we go.
and then
Oh.
you have to go back to your presentation. Sorry, folks, the joys of a hybrid.
Yeah, sorry, it wasn't working. It's not so big a deal for me, but I know you're recording this, but it's still on Senator Gabbard's PowerPoint.
Hold on.
So you,
Okay,
Okay.
let me reshare. Pause. Share. How's that?
yes.
Now I see it says gap filling projects on the top. Is that
Yes, that's it.
the slide? Yes. Yeah, now I can see it.
Thanks. Okay, perfect. We're back on. So we have all these other projects and organizations that are working together across the state and then on the islands to address invasive species. So it's really this collection of networks working together. Okay, well now the juicy stuff, like what's here in your backyards. So we highlighted your district here, and then some of the species that specifically the Oahu Invasive Species Committee is working on. So you can go to the next slide. And what you can see here is they put together a map, and I'm going to focus in on a couple of these species because they're really important. Cape Ivy, you can see in the top corner, this is the Polihua area. Cape Ivy is a smothering vine, and this really, Polihua, if you are familiar with that area, it really is up against some of the natural areas and native ecosystems. And vines are particularly damaging to forests and native ecosystems because they'll just smother everything. They'll crowd out everything. Nothing else grows in that. So the Oahu Invasive Species Committee has been working for a number of years on managing this plant pest. And they've done a really great job of, one, containing it. I mean, we haven't seen it go anywhere else on the island. It's just in this corner. But again, vines are hard to control. So this is a long-term process to manage this vine. And let me see, I gotta move my little screen here. And we have pampas grass. Those are the blue dots. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about that. And then the orange are little fire ant surveys that haven't come out positive, but we're going to talk more about that. Coconut Rhinoceros Beetle, and then there have been Coqui Frog surveys with those lighter colored stars. And I'll talk about those 3 species in more detail here. Okay, pampas grass. This is an ornamental introduction. If you've been on the mainland, this plant is pretty much everywhere in landscaping. It's really popular. And they've brought it into Hawaii. You used to see it at a lot of golf courses over here, but again, the Oahu Invasive Species Committee has been working on removing it because it is an invasive grass. It's a fire-promoting grass. It can increase the intensity of fires. When it gets into natural areas, it's really aggressive. It can outcompete native plants. And it's really expensive to control. It takes a lot of effort to get rid of this. And luckily here on Oahu, we don't have it widespread. We know where it's been planted, most of the locations, but just be aware of this one. If your neighbor or maybe even you have this in your yard, we want to remove it. And the Oahu Invasive Species Committee does do a trade out program. So they don't want to leave you with a big hole in your ground after they remove it. They'll give you a plant that's non-invasive that you can put in its place, which is really great. And next slide. And so just a look-alike, sugarcane. When sugarcane is flowering, it looks really similar to this. And sugarcane is non-invasive. It's pretty widespread across the island. But this is a look-alike that could get confused with it. But either way, just report it. And I'll give you some information at the end where you can report on these, where you know where to report anything that's weird or maybe a plant pest you think you have. And so I'll just take pauses after each species and just see if you guys have questions online or in the audience. Any questions so far? And you can always raise your hand in the middle if you just like, or even online. Sorry, I feel like I'm just going with the in-person. Any questions online?
No.
Okay, great. Okay, we'll move on to Coqui frogs. How many folks know about Coqui frogs? Okay, pretty much everybody. This guy has been around for a while. They're widespread on Hawaii Island, especially on the east side. They have a really annoying call. I wish I want to like, it's like that. Okay, good. Whenever I'm put on the spot with that, it makes me nervous and I usually fail. How'd they get here? So these guys have spread through the greenhouse plant trade. They are native to Puerto Rico and they're in Florida. And so we have a lot of trade of greenhouse plants between Florida and here. And this is how we got the Coqui frogs most likely, is bringing greenhouse plants from Florida over to the Big Island, which is one of the hubs of the greenhouse nursery trade over there. And they've just spread out of control, but we also get a lot of plants from the Big Island. So what happens here and on the other islands is that we'll hear one or two frogs. We'll get these individual introductions of Coqui frogs. But the great thing about these frogs, when it's a male, the males are the ones that make that call. People know what it sounds like. They're like, oh my God, we have Coqui frogs. So this is one pest that people are really aware of, and we really rely on the public reports because it usually comes. Somebody buys a plant and it could be a big box store. It could be a local nursery. It could even just be maybe you brought a plant back from your auntie's house over on Hawaii Island and you turn up with a Coqui frog because they'll just tuck themselves into the little potted areas in the soil. And you won't hear them probably till they're more comfortable. And at night is when they start to make their call. There are other frogs that look like them or similar. There's the greenhouse frogs. These are widespread. They hang out in the urban areas. They really like potted plants and they make kind of like this low, like purring, I can't do it, but they make like a low purring sound at night. And those guys, we're not going after. They're pretty much everywhere and they don't do much damage. So again, Coqui frogs, we're really working to not have this pest established on any of the other islands. We are dealing with a really bad naturalized population over in Waimanalo right now. And this area is right up against the Ko'olau Mountains. It's basically the cliffs is where the population is, and it spreads out across several gulches. Really hard to access, really steep terrain, a very challenging area, and we're trying to work on getting control of that area. And for now, just containing it so it doesn't spread beyond that area. But across the island here, we'll get individual calls and Department of Agriculture or the Hawaiʻi Invasive Species Committee will go out and respond to those calls and take care of those frogs. Yes.
What are you guys doing? What kind of management are you doing?
So if it's an individual frog, we'll go out and hand capture them, and Department of Agriculture likes to keep them for using at outreach events and whatnot. If it's a larger scale population, like the one in Waimanalo, or even some nurseries and some natural areas have had populations of frogs, we use citric acid, which is basically just food grade citric acid that you put in any kind of soda or juice drink, but the frog's skin is really sensitive to it. So once it makes contact, it'll kill the frog. Yeah. Any questions on Coqui frogs or anything else I've talked about? Yes.
On the Coqui, you said that they were in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Given the similarities in terms of tourism, Have they been able to control them there?
Yeah, Florida has a lot of other native and non-native species that predate on the Coqui frogs. Unlike Hawaii, that's part of our problem here in Hawaii, is that we really don't have anything to keep these pests in check. So they get out of control, especially some state on the US mainland may have the same pest, but it's not as big of a problem because there's something predating on it. And then, Florida is another just hub of invasive species where they have all kinds of reptiles like the pythons and all kinds of crazy things. So it's just not as much of a problem, but they do have them and they do make a call, but not to the sheer numbers that we have on Hawaii Island. Okay, next slide. Let me just check time here. Little fire ants. This is a big one. This is a really big threat. You can see a colony of little fire ants here. I think this is like a banana leaf, and they're harvesting aphids on it. And I'm just gonna kind of zoom out and give you an idea, if you go to the next slide, of what we're dealing with here on Oahu. So the red identifies active sites. This means these sites, there's little fire ant at these sites, and it could be multiple properties, and it can be over an acre, so that these dots kind of vary in their scale, and that they're either still being surveyed to see the extent of the problem, or they're undergoing treatment. So that's what active means. Monitoring, which is the yellow dots, this means that they've gone through the treatment and now they're just going back to make sure there's no ants there. So they're doing regular monitoring. And then eradicated means there's no ants there, which is great. And we've had a lot of success. So we can achieve eradication with these points. But when we look at this across the state, if you go to the next slide, little fire ant, again, I feel like I'm just picking on Hawaii Island, but they have a lot of the bad pests that are widespread. They have little fire ant widespread across the east side of the island. And again, this is probably how little fire ant has spread to the other islands, is through the greenhouse plant trade, and the moving of products between islands. Maui, 7 active sites, 9 monitoring, 1 eradicated. And then the islands off of Maui, they're pretty much just in prevention. They don't have any populations. We look at Kauai, we have 4 active sites, 1 monitoring. And then we look at Oahu, we have 45 active sites, 10 monitoring, 5 eradicated. We're really moving into this tipping point of we might not be able to get rid of little fire ants here if we don't act quickly and if we don't get more resources. And it really is a capacity issue. We have the tools to do the treatment. We just don't have the bodies right now to be able to do work at the level we need to address these sites. Yes.
I'm the resident manager for a condo complex in Pearl City. And I'm assuming the little red ants that used to crawl up my leg and bite are the fire ants. I've treated them with Enderman and they're now gone.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's great. So those are probably tropical fire ants. And I have a slide on those. If you jump to the next one. There you go. So we do have tropical fire ants here, and those are widespread across the island, and they're terrible too. They're not fun to deal with, and they're a lot bigger than our little fire ant. They're common in Hawaii. They like sunny, dry, open areas. So you tend to find them, these are at your parks, these are at your beach. They're ground nesting, so they are annoying where you sit down and you'll get attacked by them. But their nests are obvious. They're really easy to find. So it's easier to treat them when you do have tropical fire ants. Little fire ant, teeny tiny, so teeny tiny. And it's not widespread in the state, as I showed you on the map. We don't consider them established statewide. They like damp and shady areas. And they like to not only nest in the ground, but up in the trees, which is really challenging for management and trying to find those nests and be able to target those areas. Yeah. And you can still, these guys, if they're in your yeah, your condo complex, you can still treat them. You can use the same type of treatments that you would use for little fire ant on those. And let me just go back maybe one slide and just reiterate, Hawaii has no native ant species, but we now have over 65 introduced ant species. And there are some really bad ones like yellow crazy ant, which is really bad for native seabirds. But in my opinion, little fire ant is by far the worst. And you can go to the next slide and then the next slide. It's considered one of the world's worst 100 invasive species. And I mean, this is a very selective list. So that this is on this across the globe, this is a huge pest. It harms our health with the painful stings it has. It also, you can go to the next slide, impacts the health of our pets. It can cause blinding in pets. The ants really like the liquid of the eye. And if they're in the dog food, they'll go into the eye and they'll bite the dog's eyes. Or if they're laying on the ground and sleeping, they'll be attracted to the moisture of the eye and this has happened on Hawaii Island where animals have been stung multiple times and they get this cataract over their eyes. And they harm our economy. I mean, this is a huge problem on Hawaii Island where a lot of our agriculture is growing, especially, I mean, we all love lychee. Lychee is wonderful. And this has been a huge problem just to harvest the lychee because again, these are arboreal ants. They like to hang out in the trees and they make it a nightmare to harvest because they'll just be stinging. And these aren't stings that just go away in a day. They just get worse and worse and worse. And then they'll be itchy for like 2 weeks. So they're really terrible. They also harvest other pests that can damage your crops and just lower the production.
So what's that white stuff?
That's aphids and whitefly.
And they are eating that or?
They're farming it because they do eat it. But they want lots of it for the colony. So they'll like create, they're like filling their refrigerator basically. And it's bad for the rest of the plant, the actual plant, because it causes disease and lower food production. So it's, yeah, I mean, ants are really smart. They're pretty amazing. And of course, they harm our environment. Ground nesting seabirds, especially eggs, they'll go after. If they get into our native forests, I mean, they're gonna really damage our Hawaiian forest birds and plants and invertebrates.
Chelsea, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
That first slide you showed, I think of where the little fire ants are, most of them are on the windward side.
Yes.
And so we haven't seen them on, luckily in West Oahu yet. But what is the typical way they're being transferred, or how are they migrating over to different parts of the islands? What have you seen?
Yeah, such a great question. And I have
Repeat it, Chelsea.
Yes, so the question is, looking at that map I showed of Oahu, it seems like there's a big concentration of the infestations on the windward side. And she was asking, how are they moving around? How are they getting around? So let me just jump to that slide here.
Wow, they don't like west side.
Thank God.
And this is
We don't want them on the west side.
well, this is the point I want to make. That the absence of a point on the west side of the island doesn't mean they're not here. It just means we don't know yet. And there's been a lot of activity and a lot of events specifically about little fire ant on windward Oahu. And I'm really glad senators put this community event together so we can talk about this, because I don't think this is truthful of what the situation is. We just don't know. So we really need residents in this area to take little fire ant kits, which I'm gonna pull up and show you guys on Zoom, and test your yard. And I can do a little demonstration. Maybe we can walk I don't know if that'll work, but I can show you how to do that. But we really need people to survey over here and just be more aware. It's not this environment, it could be perfectly fine for them, even though it is drier. and more open area compared to the windward side. But there's plenty of vegetation that they would be happy to have a colony on. And you guys are definitely bringing things in, and there's stuff here that could definitely transport little fire ant. So how are they spreading? They're very tiny, so they can spread a lot of ways without knowing it. But typically it's plants, it's cut flowers, soil, gravel, mulch, fruit and produce, vehicles and equipment. I'm basically saying everything almost. So it can move on a lot of different materials. Yes.
Without a queen, how would they move?
They can form little colonies. So yes, you do need a queen. But a colony can fit in a cracked macadamia nut. Like, they don't need a lot of space. And they've seen that over on Hawaii Island. They've picked up broken mac nuts and there's an entire colony in there with a queen and everything. And what happens is they'll merge, the colonies will merge together if there's multiple colonies, and they'll form a super colony. So they're very aggressive. They're very good at taking over. When you have little fire ant in your area, you really don't have any other ants. It's just little fire ants because they're just so aggressive. And I'm going to give you guys more information on what you can do individually to help with this situation, and just make sure that your area, like your home, and then also your community is either free of little fire ants, or if you have them, we start making the right steps to make sure we're treating them. This just, if you go forward, yes. Sorry to make you skip all over. And one more. So you can start with having one resident, one house that tests positive for little fire ants. And the problem with little fire ants is that you really don't know you have it until it's widespread, because they are so tiny. They're not like the tropical fire ant where it's really easy to see them, or they're crossing your path and you're like, okay, they're there. These will be up in the trees, and they'll be growing their colony and maybe even spreading to your neighbor's house. And then before you know it, you have several properties, and you can move to the next slide. And this, even though it started as one colony, this will become one colony as they spread. So one of the problems with management is we rely on voluntary consent. We rely on everybody in the neighborhood saying, yes, you can come onto my property, you can survey. Yes, you can come onto my property and you can treat. If one person in this block isn't on board with the treatment, it's not going to be effective because you're not treating the entirety of the colony. So it's really important. And we've done this on communities in Windward, Oahu, where we've relied on community members that have been like, yes, I will help with the situation. And they go to their neighbors' doors and are like, hey, like, you need to treat for little fire ant. And that's been huge for us. Okay, we can go next slide. Yeah, you can go one more.
Oh, sorry.
No worries. Okay, so what you can do for little fire ants, and let me see, is we have these really great little fire ant kits. And everybody that's here in person, I would love it if you take one or even a couple, because you can hand them out to your neighbors. And these little kits are great because inside you'll have this little Ziploc bag, and you'll have these sticks in here. And you can actually break these sticks up if you have a big yard. If you have you might want a few for your condo. But you just put, so these guys, peanut butter, or if you're allergic to peanut butter, you can use mayonnaise, and you just put a little smear of it on the end. And what you want to do is not put this in the middle of your grassy yard, but put it along the edges where it's a little bit more shady, especially if you have trees. Put these by the trees, and you just lay them down, and you leave them in your grass or wherever you laid them down for about 45 minutes or an hour, and then you can collect them. And if they have ants on them, put them back into the Ziploc bag, seal it, stick it in the freezer for 24 hours, and then the next day, take this is the hardest part because people will just leave them in their freezer and forget about them. But you got this envelope, it already has a stamp on it. And this goes to the Oahu Invasive Species Committee. So you just put your frozen ants in here, seal it, throw it in the mailbox, and then they'll contact you either way. With whether you're negative or you're positive and you don't hear from them, you can always give them a call because all the information is right here. Even with instructions, if you forget what I just told you on how to do the survey, you can easily just look at this little envelope. But you can do these, 20 feet apart across the perimeter of your yard, and that would be a pretty good indicator of whether or not you have little fire ants. And doing that once a year is really good because even if you're not moving things around or buying new plants, maybe your neighbor is. So you just always want to be vigilant about that. And that's one of the big things of how we're seeing these ants move is with greenhouse plants. So if you're buying new plants or you're doing new landscaping or even your neighbor's doing new landscaping, you really want to test those plants if they're yours before you put them in the ground. And you can do like a little quarantine for them. And this would be good even for Coqui frogs. Like you could just, if you hear a frog calling at night, then you know. So you could do a little quarantine before you put them into the ground for a day and do a little survey with the peanut butter or the mayonnaise and just make sure that they're free of little fire ants. Okay.
So if we get nothing, do you still want to know?
No, if you get nothing, that's great. But like I said, it's good to do it once a year and just be vigilant about it and make sure that your neighborhood is free of little fire ants and to spread the word too. And just be like, hey, I tested my yard, I didn't have anything, but maybe you want to do the same thing. And that's what, a lot of these neighborhoods, especially in Kailua, like the Lanikai Loop, there's quite a few infestations just within Lanikai, even an infestation on the beach now that's spread from the rain events and up towards the end of the Lanikai Loop. There's been infestations and the ants have been running down the stream from all the rain events and things and spreading that way to the beach and to other residents. So it's just good to be vigilant and know what these pests are and just spreading the word. And I think I'm running so over time right now, but I'll try to. Okay. Okay, we can move to the next slide. Coconut Rhinoceros Beetle. Here you have an adult beetle, and there you have the larva or the grubs. These guys are terrible. And Eva area is kind of an epicenter right now of coconut rhinoceros beetle damage. You can go to the next slide. What these guys do is they can kill coconut palms, and that's huge in our island ecosystems. And this pest has been spreading across the Pacific since World War II, most likely through military transport, and that's probably how we got it here in Hawaii. This guy is established and widespread on Guam. It's done a ton of damage over there, and we probably got through military traffic was how this pest was introduced. It first was detected at Hickam Air Force Base back in 2013, and a rapid response effort was launched. But the problem with this pest, unlike little fire ant, is we don't have great management tools for it still. We have some things that work and can work on individual cases, but at the state that we're at here on Oahu, it's really challenging to manage this pest, and we're looking for more tools to be able to put in our toolbox. But what you see here is they go into the meristem of palms, they bore down, and then they cut these V-cut shapes into the palms. And you'll see that if you drive down Fort Weaver Road, just the golf courses on either side, it's just all CRB damage with those coconut palms. But they don't just attack coconut palms. If you go to the next slide, they attack other palms, royal palms, date palms. And when they don't have these implantable sources, they'll go for other plants, which has been really scary. Banana, sugarcane, hala, even kalo. So this is really scary that this pest has such a wide host range. If you go to the next slide, so looking at the first introduction, that little blue area and that red dot over in 2013, which is what this map is showing. And then we fast forward to 2022. And you can see that little blue blob has just expanded exponentially. And then we basically have points all around the island of detection. So these are CRB positive detections across the island. And you go to the next slide. And what we were really focusing on Oahu was just containing it and making sure it doesn't get to the other islands. But as of last year, we had the first detection over on Kauai back in May, and then Maui and Big Island. But these islands, it's still relatively small detections. So working really, really hard to make sure they're serving the rest of the island, and that it doesn't turn into another Oahu. So next slide. So what actions can be taken? There are treatments. You can treat individual trees with certain insecticides by drilling in and putting insecticide into the trunks of like coconut trees. CRB, like the adults, lay their larvae in green waste, mulch piles, or compost, which has been the main vector of how the pest is spread throughout, is like bagged compost or moving soil or just green waste, because it's not really regulated. We don't have great regulations on that right now. But people on their own properties, you can treat potential breeding sites by fumigating or doing heat treatments. You can do containment, and we're working on rules with the Department of Agriculture that would help us regulate the movement of green waste and compost here on Oahu and also across the state, because that is a major pathway of how this pest is moving around. Detection, this is more so for the other islands now, is using traps, doing palm surveys, breeding site surveys. And like I said, we don't have the best tools to manage this larger population we have. So there really needs to be future work on identifying a natural enemy of coconut rhinoceros beetle that we could use for management. There's a bill at the legislature right now to be able to use mesh nets, or communities to be able to use mesh nets, because you can put those over the top of your palms or even over a mulch pile, and that will stop CRB from going in or climbing out of or going into your palms and doing damage. And of course, with all these pests and with invasive species work, there just needs to be more resources and funding to support boots on the ground and identifying more tools.
Chelsea, does this beetle fly?
Yes, it doesn't fly far though. It can fly up to a mile. But typically the way we've seen it spread is through like the movement of the compost, the green waste and whatnot. But it could, like on the golf courses, it can easily jump from one palm to another palm.
Fly.
Yeah, flying.
For funding, have you considered offering them for sale to entomology departments and other universities?
These guys offering them for sale?
I sent a rhinoceros beetle to the University of Maine Orono entomology department. They were happy to get it.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, we haven't considered that. Yeah, that could definitely put some bucks in our pocket if people are on board with that. And they are really fun. They do a lot of research at the University of Hawaii on these guys. So they have like a breeding population there, and it's always an interesting experience to like put your hand in there and have a bunch of CRB adults. And even the larvae are they're just huge. They're bigger than the adults. Yeah, Senator.
So Chelsea, you said they landed in 2013. Did they spread to the neighbor islands because lack of government resources to help you guys do your job? Is that basically what happened, or was it?
Not entirely. Like I mentioned, we don't have the greatest tools to deal with this pest, even though it's been spreading around the Pacific since World War II. They did identify a virus that has kept the population suppressed on other islands, like the Solomon Islands, and Samoa and some other islands. But to make it more complicated, there's actually two biotypes of CRB. And Guam has both biotypes. And this virus that they found that suppressed and has been working really well in the other islands only attacks one biotype. But guess what we have here in Hawaii? We have the other biotype that the virus doesn't attack. So there's a lot of work and resources being pushed into starting that research up again and going to the native range of CRB and trying to identify what those natural enemies are. But more resources, I think, especially for the other islands, is needed to have that rapid response effort. And on Oahu, we're really going to need to work with our communities and give them tools where they can manage CRB on their own property and keep it contained. But we need those bigger tools too.
Also, you probably saw the piece on Hawaii News Now on CRBs this last week,
Yes.
where the 4 mayors and counties said that agreed that there should be, governor should declare an emergency and treat this like an emergency.
Yes.
And I'm not gonna put you on the spot to see whether you agree or not, but I think that they brought up some very good points.
Yeah.
Dealing with this. The governor has said, well, it's the Department of Ag who has the responsibility of doing that. And the Department of Ag is saying, well, what you were saying, not enough tools in the toolbox. It's not really an effective treatment. So we go along with that.
I would say that, emergency proclamation or declaring emergency allows like the release of funding. And I do think more funding is needed to be able to address what's happening on the other islands where it's not widespread over there. And what they need right now is just more boots on the ground to be able to deploy and use the tools that they have, which are, we have drones that can spray pesticides into the crowns of trees or using a cherry picker. That stuff is expensive. So needing to have the resources to do that while the population is still manageable, it would be helpful for the other islands. Here on Oahu, we got to have a different strategy and we got to work on a different strategy because you saw that map and just the explosion of blue on that. So we don't want to see our coconut palms and just our views totally changed in the matter of a few years. I mean, think about Waikiki with all the coconut palms and they just turn into little nubs. I mean, just the cultural and the economic costs of this pest are going to be huge. And we can't just be like, oh, it's widespread on Oahu, we shouldn't do anything. We really need to manage it. Yeah.
Is there
Chelsea,
a program to assist communities that have them?
Yeah, we're working on developing, so under the University of Hawaii, there's the Coconut Rhinoceros Beetle response team. So that team was formed in 2013 by the USDA APHIS, who came out to Hawaii to help address the initial response efforts. And that team still exists and they're really robust and they do a lot of the research. And they have a lot of the boots on the ground, especially folks, they have a ton of staff because they do all the trap checks around the island, which there's like thousands of traps out there right now. So that team for Oahu specifically, we're going to build out a bigger outreach program to support the community on Oahu because we really don't need to do trap checks over here. Like CRB is here. What we need to do is give support and tools to our communities, especially the ones that are kind of in that big blue blob that are really seeing the impacts of CRB right now. So we are kind of transitioning right now to just answer your question really short. We're transitioning the strategy that was Oahu and turning that into something that's going to be more community-based. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question, but it was actually similar to what he
Okay.
said, and whether there was outreach to the communities. It sounds like the CRB team would be the folks for me to connect with. And my curiosity is the homeowners associations and the rental property managers that's really the point of contact at least on the west side. I can see that to be able to funnel this information through. And that was my question. I have a part 2 has to do with the legislative testimony. Are there, and maybe this is a follow-up for Senator Gabbard's office, but I'm just curious now that we're past the first lateral and going into crossover, what bills are still moving forward that are tracked that as priorities to support. So that's a question that I have, I guess. Like I said, Senator Gabbard's office maybe can help me with that. Point me in the direction of which ones I need to testify for.
Yeah,
We'll get back, Karen, we'll get back to her in terms of the list. You had mentioned one of them.
Yeah. the mesh one.
The mesh one, I saw that one.
Did you
Yeah.
hear Senator Gabbard? He said, him and his office will get back and make sure you guys know which one. And there are a lot of really great bills this session, addressing invasive species, not just, there's a lot of really great, funding ones to build up, capacity at Department of Agriculture, through our own Hawaiʻi Invasive Species Council, and a number of other bills, but also just kind of beefing up the regulations and the ability to manage these high-risk pathways like the nursery trade. So that bill tracker, that the QR code, that's basically our HISC legislative tracking. And it's like basically it's like
It's
everything.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm more curious on the ones, especially with the
Focusing on-
CRB. Yeah.
For sure. And so, yeah, I mean, you set me up well. So things you can do, you can submit legislative testimony, you know, with the capital.hawaii.gov, it's really easy to submit testimony, and maybe, Senator Gabbard and his staff can help point folks in the right direction of what bills are out there. If this list that I have on the QR code, is substantial. You can also volunteer. There's great projects. I have a website there, and it's just taking action on your own. If you want to go to the next slide, just don't plant invasive plants. But a lot of times we don't know what's invasive, and we have a really great website for that called Plant Pono, and you can look up different plants, and just like deconning, like cleaning your gear before, especially if you're hiking in footwear, like making sure things are clean before you go to the next spot. And then, of course, the communities are the most aware of, you know, what's kind of normal, what pests and species that you see on the day-to-day, like your gecko or your anole or a cockroach. You're like, I see that every day, but maybe you see something weird. You guys are the best eyes at pointing those things out. So report stuff. We have a call-in number, 643-PEST, or you can go online, 643pest.org. And then I have the kits here. You folks online, you can go to stoptheant.org and you can request these kits, and they'll send them to you so you can test your own yard. I think that's all I got. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Senator.
Thank you.
Yeah. You want me to stop share? Yes.
Mutated mosquitoes being released here.
Mutated. So the mosquitoes that are using the Wolbachia, which is the bacteria that's found in like 99% of the mosquitoes, and it's a birth control. Those are being released over in Haleakala, Maui first. So that is set to happen. The process, they haven't actually put the mosquitoes out there yet, but the process has begun. And hopefully what happens is after that